Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paragliding Debrief, the podcast that takes you deep behind the lines of the world of paragliding and paramotoring. Today we are joined by a very special guest. We have Richard Dolan, one of the UK's up and coming rising stars of the paramotoring world and also a very talented paragliding pilot. So much to come on this episode. We're going to be talking to Richard mainly about his west to east crossing of Australia that he did unsupported with paramotors with Andrew Twitty, a Guinness World Record attempt, and also being the first man in the world to be able to fly around the pyramids in Egypt at night. Not to mention being the first UK pilot to achieve the rocket loop, the brand new and quite frankly terrifying new paramotoring manoeuvre. So much to talk about on this one. I'm super excited. It's going to be a super interesting one. So sit back, relax and join us as we meet the legend that is Richard Dolan. So here we are. And we're sat here with Richard Dolan. Hello, Mr. Dolan.
Hello, Mr. Tryon.
So I've been super excited about doing this podcast. The main focus that I want this podcast to be about is your epic journey across Australia. I mean, what an epic journey it was. For those who don't know, basically, you and Andrew Twitty were the first two paramotor pilots to cross the entirety of Australia from west to east.
That's correct, yeah, by paramotor and unsupported as well.
Completely unsupported.
Yeah.
An absolute epic adventure. It's the crux of what I'd like to talk to you about this evening, but we will come back to that in a little while. First of all, before we get on to that, I would like to know just a little bit, and I'd like the guys to know a little bit about who you are. So you did the crossing of Australia on a paramotor.
Yeah.
Paramotor. I mean, I know now you're quite regarded as quite a prolific paraglider pilot as well. But I believe paramotoring came first.
Yes, absolutely. So I started for a sister company of Parajet called Rotron, and back in my time there, I was an engineer. While I was there, they opened up this fly to work scheme. So I managed to get basically a paramotor on a fly to work scheme, deposit paid, and then the rest straight on my paycheck.
So I want to get this straight. So fly to work. So I've heard of like ride to work. So you take a bike, you ride to work. So am I right? Fly to work is flying to work.
Yeah, did that quite regularly.
No, that's very cool.
It was very cool, absolutely. Even landed in the car park a couple of times, but that was a bit close, that one, so I didn't do that anymore.
And there was a scheme that would actually compensate you financially for doing that.
Yeah, well, we got a bit of discount for being employed there, and then basically it just comes straight out of your paycheck, so you don't need to worry about it. You pay the deposit, you get to fly straight away. So it made it easy to get the paramotor. You know, they're not cheap bits of kit, but yeah, I was hooked straight away, so carried on.
It's something I've never actually heard of. That is a wonderful idea. And an engineering background, so you came from an engineering background into the world of paramotoring.
Yes, yeah, that's what got me into Rotron. I spent 5 years at university in Liverpool, and from there just managed to get a job with a company. They hooked me in by saying they sell and make flying cars, and I was like, yep, get me in the door, let's see what's going on. And that got me into the flying world, and like I say, just obsessed from there, you know, watching videos and then flying for a couple of years before realizing I should probably do an SIV after getting a couple of collapses, wing overs, this and the other, and that's where we met.
That is where we met. We did. We met on, how long ago was that now? That was some time ago.
I've been flying for 6 years, so that would be 4 years ago.
Wow, time goes by quick. And just going before that, so the flying car thing, now, I believe, if I'm right, that was something that actually made mainstream media.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not something that I was involved in, but it definitely got me hooked into the door. Sure.
And when you speak about a flying car, to put that into context, what actually was it? A flying car? I mean, the kind of clues in the name, I guess.
Yeah, it was basically like a giant paramotor. So you had a big propeller on the back, you had a chute that you used to fly it, and it had 4 wheels and an engine. And you engaged a gear to drive the propeller instead of the wheels. So it was road legal. You could drive it. I drove it to an event to show off, you know, the company and what they could do. I have flown a version of it. It's quite a bit different, but it's a very interesting project.
And what got you into paragliding? So paramotoring and paragliding, when I started, I mean, I've been flying now for 18 years. And when I first got into it, I knew of paramotoring, but it was a very separate discipline. There was paragliding, there was paramotoring, and never shall the two meet. However, quite recently, I say recently, probably over the last 8 to 10 years, there seems to be becoming more and more of a crossover between paragliding and paramotoring. So what, I mean, did you leave paramotoring well, I know you didn't because you've just done last year you did the crossing of Australia. So clearly you didn't leave paramotoring to take up paragliding. But where did the kind of paragliding aspect for you come from?
It was from the first SIV that we did. So I realized I needed to do this SIV to get the skills to be safe on the paramotor. It's crossover when you're in the air. There's fundamental differences. I think it is quite a different sport in terms of trying to get places and the way you fly, but there's definitely crossover. So doing that SIV, my initial launches were from Babadag Mountain, and it's the acro that hooked me in for sure. So free flying, the wind in your hair, and just getting in that acro and the adrenaline rush, that's what hooked me into it. And then from there, the challenge of trying to get places without using that engine, just using the thermals, just using what nature gives you. It's a different kind of flying, and I like that challenge.
And I guess it's nice. I mean, I do paramotor. I haven't done it for a couple of years, since before COVID. But there is something lovely about going out early in the morning or late in the evening from a flat field, to be able to take off, to be able to go where you want to go. On paragliders, we're always looking for lift, we're looking for thermals. We have to be thinking a little bit more about trying to stay up. The thing I love myself with paramotoring is you can look at somewhere, you can go on a cross-country flight, you can go and visit the castle, you can go and fly around the leg, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I love it so much. You know, crossing Australia, we've done loads of trips previously, and actually going and seeing something, landing there, camping. No, you don't need to disappear and hike away for miles to get back up a hill. What if the wind's not in the right direction for that hill? You pick a field, you take off, and you go to your destination. You camp, you go again. And it's the beauty of paramotoring. You can really travel somewhere, see something up close and personal, land, meet the people, take in sort of that culture of that area, and then take off and go again and see the next part of it.
And was it, so, I mean, I remember, again, we'll come back to the SIV, which is where I met you. Did you discover acro paragliding on the SIV? Was it doing the SIV, doing some of the maneuvers, like, I don't know, doing the spiral dive or the sat? Did you know, were you already kind of interested in the acro scene? Because you've become, I mean, it's fair to say, you've become a pretty prolific acro pilot. Was it something you knew about before you got into it, or was it a pleasant discovery during your SIV?
No, there was this one video, Acro Fiesta by Shams.
Oh yes, got the best soundtrack ever. I love that one. Yes,
Francois Rogolski, and I was watching that on repeat for months on end, and hooked on it. You know, just that the music, the vibe, I was just hooked on it. And I remember saying to one of my mentors at the time in flying, I really want to do helis one day, helicopters. I really want to do it. He's like, yeah, well, I'm not sure about that. You know, a lot of people don't. I was thinking, no, I'm going to do it. And I started doing wing overs, getting collapses, knowing that there's, you know, a lot more to it now than what I first thought. You know, you just go up, you practice, you get it. But no, you really need guidance in pushing these things, because it can be very dangerous. But yeah, that's what got me into it, and pushing with the acro on the motor and practicing on the paraglider first. And
I remember when you did the SIV, and the guy that I was working with at the time, Akis, I remember us both saying then, this kid has a massive amount of talent. You weren't working, I mean, you were doing the fly to work thing. Were you working full-time in the industry at the time? Because it seemed at the time you had kind of 1 foot in the industry, 1 foot still in a normal working life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was full-time engineering. It was 8 till 5, Monday to Friday.
What kind of engineering was it?
It was aerospace to begin with, okay. So rotary engines for UAVs, and that's what Rotoron is, the sister company to Parajet. So I remember being sat on this beach here thinking, man, how do I get a lifestyle like this? How do I be out here doing all these things? And I think it was Helen Reid we were talking to at the time. Kind of went from there, really. And I came back 6 months later on a blackout, which I remember. Kind of a different story, but it's just carried on progressing into this lifestyle, and 4 years later, here we are. And
you had to take a leap, because I remember talking to you about it as well, because when I started, I left a 9-to-5 job, I left a very cozy life, girlfriend, mortgage, all that kind of stuff, and went straight into paragliding, full guns blazing, completely changed my life. And I remember having a chat to you, and it's, for people who've done the same thing or in the same position where they're thinking of doing it, it's an incredibly scary thing to do, to unplug from normal life, as it were, and to delve completely into the world of paragliding. I mean, everybody who I've known do it, myself, you, for example, has never looked back, has never regretted it. But it's an incredibly scary thing to do. And I remember you sitting there. I remember you talking with Helen about it and just kind of saying to you, it's something I promise you, buddy, you won't regret it. And so at what point, sort of after that, did you take the plunge? How did it work? How did you kind of immerse yourself completely into that world?
So, yeah, it's a crazy hard thing to do. Like, you get like this roller coaster of emotions of going, oh, I need to leave this job. Oh, well, it's a security, I get this, and go back and forth. And that's exactly what I was doing. So I moved to Parajet, started working with the sales there, and really enjoyed it for a little bit. But then that peak came where I was like, no, I'm still working a 9 till 5, 8 till 5, still not traveling, still not seeing these things that I wanted to see. So then I leave the job for something else and I get a different job, just kind of like scratching at it for a little bit, but not really getting at it. And then after that, this opportunity came up with Jack, where I said to him,
Jack
Pimblett, yeah. And I said to him, look, I'm leaving engineering. I'm, just a chit chat because we'd met a few times, we were talking. I said to him, look, I'm leaving, I'm going to do videography, because the only other thing I could think of was having this camera in my hand. And paragliding was part of the fun and doing all this stuff. So I ended up working for him for 6 months because he needed a videographer, which was great and got me more training, got me more experience, and actually just like got me traveling a lot more.
And that's another string to your bow. So although you're from an engineering background, you are a very good videographer as well. Where did that come from?
That's just a hobby. That's, I don't know. I just picked up the camera, started enjoying it. I wouldn't say I'm very good. Definitely a hobbyist, but it's, I enjoy doing it. But the paragliding is where the real passion is,
Yeah.
Going out and helping people gain, their first 40K in their cross country, or helping them to get their stalls, or this, that, and the other. It's really like an enjoyable thing, even just helping people off launch and calming them down. I really enjoy that sort of stuff, and seeing them progress, their excitement from it, all of these things. So that's what sort of drew me back to that. The videography, I enjoy it. It's a hobby. It's kind of beneficial to have, but the paragliding is where, and the paramotoring is where it's really at for me.
And you still do, again, we'll come to it in a moment, that you did the crossing of Australia. So you're still, you've been sponsored and things. Again, we'll come to that a little bit afterwards, but you're still very much in the paramotoring world as well as the paragliding world. You've really immersed yourself within the paragliding world as well now.
Yeah, absolutely. Primarily paramotoring. That's what I started with. That's what I feel most comfortable with. It's really what I'm used to. But moving over to this paragliding side of it, doing the SIV several times, taking that onto the acrobatic, it's just really comfortable being under a glider now. The thermals, they can throw things at me. I feel confident because of the things I've gone through, and that's naturally led onto the challenge of cross country, trying to get somewhere, looking at this invisible air. When I first got into it over in North Macedonia, I was like, wow, you just find the lift, turn around in it, and off you go. Find the next one. It's going to be easy. You just follow gliders. It's not that easy. But, I've started a bit more into it. I've been doing a lot of research, and the primary one is just practice, really, isn't it?
Currency and airtime.
Yeah, absolutely. So really enjoying the paragliding side of it. My love is still the paramotoring and the acro, but I am definitely keen on pushing that XC challenge. Once you've had a little bit of it, I heard a phrase today, it's like licking that lollipop. Once you get that first lick of that lollipop, you can't put it down. That's it, you're hooked to it.
It's a great way to describe it. Honestly is. And it's wonderful to be able to do both disciplines, to have paramotoring and paragliding in your arsenal. It covers all bases. It's a wonderful thing to do. So, we actually started work together. So for those who don't know, that Richard and I actually work together now on the back of you having such a keen interest when we did the SIV years ago. And having seen that, there are some people you come across in flying that have an obvious natural ability, that have an obvious natural talent. You can just tell sometimes that people are going to go places. But in the meantime, while we've been working together, so came this project to do what basically is it's a world first. It's the first time, I believe, anyone's done this type of adventure that you did. What an adventure it was, buddy. Tell us more about this. This is what I've been super excited to talk to you about.
Yeah, it was a proper adventure, I like to say. There was things that went wrong It took a lot longer than we first planned. Financially, cost 3, 4, 5 times as much. So a proper adventure. And it all started with Andrew Twitty and Scott Ryan basically having a drink, and Scott, who lives in Australia, he said, I'm going to fly across Australia one day. And Twitty, all right, bet, we'll do it. He got in touch with me thinking I'm mad enough to do it. Obviously, I was like, hell yeah, let's go. And that's how it all came about, just a random conversation.
All best ideas are always born in a bar. Always. It's down in history.
So basically, after that point, he told me about it. I was mad keen for it. Knew we needed sponsorship in some aspect for it. Started looking at all the gear we need. Started looking at the routes. In all honesty, Scott smashed the route planning. He did all of it effectively. All of the route planning, the stops we needed, the fuel caches, where we might need to go, all of these things. And Twit and I organised our kit to be there and basically just carried it out.
and I want to make sure that we're super clear about what it is that you did. So not only, you drove across Australia from east to west to look at the route, to leave your fuel deposits and what have you. And then, what exactly was the plan? What exactly is it that you were intending to do?
So the plan, like you say, drive across Australia from Byron Bay all the way to Steep Point. So from Byron Bay, which is the most easterly point, all the way to Steep Point, which is the most westerly point. Drive along and put the fuel caches in, because the distances, especially across the Nullarbor, which is this kind of desolate area across the bottom of Australia, the distance between fuel stations was too great for our paramotor, how much fuel we could carry, the speeds we were flying. So we had to put fuel caches in there. While we were doing that, checking the landing spots, we had to change a few from what Scott originally planned, because they were too small or not suitable, or they changed since the satellite imagery. All of these things. Plan the route so that it was as smooth as possible on the way over. I initially thought we didn't need to do that. And how wrong I was, because this thing was meant to take about 5 weeks and ended up taking, 3 months in the end, because of the breakdowns we had, because of the weather, and it's just a long way, isn't it? It's 5,000 kilometers. I
was about to ask you, what exactly is not only did you have to drive from east to west to do all of that, you then had to fly back from west to east. What is the distance to cover Australia? 5,000 kilometers?
So the route we had to do was 5,100 kilometers. That's because we did it unsupported. So we had to go what was the Overlander Roadhouse, which is the last accommodation before the most westerly point. So we stayed there, flew out to Steep Point, flew back to the Overlander, and then following main roads basically to get the fuel caches, to get the places we need to go, fuel stations. We couldn't carry supplies with us for, what we thought was 5 weeks. We couldn't carry the supplies for that, so we had to make sure we could land at safe places. So that was the initial plan. What actually happened, Scott had engine issues on the first day. He had, engine problems. So he pulled out on the first day, and it was just, unfortunately, just myself and Andrew doing it, which was a huge shame, especially because he'd put all the work in there. He'd done all the planning. He'd made sure it was all safe. And one of the stops, we had a mistake in that we thought we put a fuel dump there, and we called Scott and was like, where did we put it? He was like, no, we didn't put one there. So we ended up causing ourselves a problem because we didn't do the planning properly.
And how far can you go on these machines? What kind of distance can you achieve from one full tank of fuel?
So it's on average about 3 hours, but we were fully loaded with all the camera gear, emergency rations. We had about 18 litres of fuel, our camping kit, like the tent, sleeping bag, navigation gear, and then extra clothing. So I was about 160 kilos all up on this wing. And that meant that we need more power and this, that, and the other. Basically, we had about 3 hours of fuel, sometimes even 2. Depending on what altitude we're going. The speeds varied so much depending on the wind on the day. So we could do anything from 30k in a day because of the weather to 400k in a day. Our best one was 400k.
Wow. Yeah. Big difference. A big
Huge
difference.
Yeah. The first day it was 360k. So it was the golden day. Like nothing could have gone better on this day. And it was the first day. So we got back thinking, man, this is going to be easy. 360k, we smashed that out in one day, no problem. It was warm enough, I didn't need to wear gloves. We had a tailwind going out to the sea, like the edge of Australia. And then the land heated up, we pulled us back in. It was perfect. And then the next day was a bit more realistic to the rest of the trip. We got 50k in, it was bumpy, it was turbulent, it was horrible flying. We landed going, absolutely not flying anymore in this. We're going to stay here. And that was kind of the rest of the trip.
Oh, man. And how'd you get all that gear with you? So what I noticed on the video, I mean, what was brilliant and what I absolutely loved while you did the adventure is you made, was it a 10-part?
Yes.
It was a 10-part, basically a mini documentary series, a 10-episode documentary series. And I'm going to put a link to that. If you guys have not seen it, I would strongly recommend seeing it. It's a fantastic, it was a brilliantly made. On the hoof, it follows your adventures, but really nicely done. There are some spectacular images in it, and it was a really nicely put together kind of docu-series, documenting your trip all the way through. But I was like you seem to have kind of modified equipment, so you weren't doing foot launched paramotoring. It seemed like you guys were using something like trikes or something like that.
Yeah, so I got a Foxy trike. So I'm a team pilot for Fly Products now, which has come about from this Australia trip and the other stuff I've been doing. And I got the Fly Products rider with a Plini 202, which is the most efficient kind of for its size and weight on the market at the minute, which is why we went for it.
Plini's the engine.
Yes,
right?
sorry,
Yeah.
The engine. Plini 202 is the engine, and then the Foxy trike, Fly Products Foxy trike. The paramotor just slots onto it and bolts on, like no problem, no tools needed. Really, really useful bit of kit. I initially didn't want to go with a trike. I didn't think I'd need it, extra weight, wouldn't need it, would land somewhere. It makes landing a little bit harder because you can't just come down onto a point. And how wrong I was. We had so much distance that I would have been walking with about 150 kilos. It just wouldn't be feasible, So glad I got convinced otherwise on that one, actually. That was Jack who did most of the convincing. He was like, there's no way you're doing it.
So you take off from a rolling start. You're sitting in the trike.
Sitting in the trike.
Because a lot of people won't necessarily know what the trike is. So go into a little bit more detail about what that... the way to see it, guys, you've got to watch Where would they find this 10-part
It's on YouTube, just Rich_Dolan, and it should pop up there. You see me with my Embolo helmet on and sunglasses on the profile picture, and that's the one. And there's a 10 episodes there to follow the chaos as it unfolded.
Oh, fantastic! There was some real highlights. It was the perfect motion picture movie. It had the incredible start. Then it had the emotional roller coaster, the good days, the bad days, and just honestly, there was many parts of Australia. No, who knows about the middle of Australia? Everyone's heard of Ayers Rock, but actually there were places you were going to, the communities, the people you were meeting, and which we'll come to in a second. But back to the equipment. When I was watching this docu-series, how'd you get that there? How did you manage to get all the kit from the UK to Australia?
Well, it was squeezed into a suitcase.
It was actually, it genuinely was.
The Fly Products one comes with a travel bag. So it packs down into there. We dismantled it a bit further to make sure it's not damaged and packaged it up. Trike, it folds down so small. All of these things, you can pack them. And that's the kind of the beauty of the paramotor as well. Everyone thinks you can't travel with it, but I've traveled to Egypt, Kuwait, Australia, Spain, France, Italy, all of these on the plane and back with the kit. And it just means you get to see these places in just another light.
And it is true, because people keep saying, well, no, the problem with paramotoring is it's not very versatile or you can't travel with it. But you can, right? It is possible. I mean, you've proved it, obviously, is possible.
Yeah. It's one of my favourite things to do. And before coming out to Turkey, I was in France, flying around the Dordogne area and just seeing these chateaux, beautiful chateaux on top of the hill, flying around the rivers there, just seeing this amazing landscape and getting an EasyJet flight. Not costing that much carrying the paramotor over. It's really not as bad as people think it might be. So over in Australia, Australia was a different kettle of fish with the cost of flights for sure. But we managed to get all of our gear there. And like I say, it was 160 kilos with the wing, all of the equipment, the paramotor itself. Obviously, we didn't have any fuel, but yeah, all of these things. Yeah, it was a lot to carry.
And you said you were carrying tents. You were literally. I can't emphasize the point that you were completely unsupported. So were you stopping and then going into B&Bs, or you were literally camping with your gear?
Yeah, most of the time. Andrew Twitty hates camping, and I've tried to convert him. And some nights it was getting on the edge of it, and then he'd go into the tent, put his headphones in, so he couldn't hear the creepy crawlies because he hates it that much.
I mean, you're in the outback of Australia, creepy crawlies. I can imagine everyone camping in the outback of Australia. The first thing I think about is creepy crawlies. Big creepy crawlies. Everything in Australia, I hear, tries to kill you. Everything's got spikes or teeth, or it's the home of every deadliest creation known to man.
The good thing about those is that you can't hear them coming. When we're camping, you can feel the thud of the kangaroos in the distance. You can feel it on the ground. We had airbeds, we're not sleeping on the ground itself, but you can still feel the thud of those kangaroos as they're hopping about. And that one's quite scary because you wake up in the morning, you see these big sort of emu prints with a giant claw in the middle. You see the kangaroo prints all around you, and you think you could just squish the tent, no problem. But it's all good.
And did you? I mean, everyone's dying to know. I know I am. Did you get into your sleeping bag one night where you weren't necessarily feeling alone?
My closest call was a baby brown snake. So we hadn't seen any snakes. It had been too cold for about a month and a half. It had been way too cold for snakes. And then we got to this place called Majura Pass. It's about halfway across the Nullarbor. And I remember walking along, I just saw something out the corner of my eye, and it was a snake, but my foot was over the top of it as I was walking. So I just hopped that little bit, didn't know the severity of what this snake is, so just started giggling. And I imagined Twitty in my head because he would run off faster than anything I've ever seen. So I got back, started talking to the guys, and they said, "Oh, that was a baby brown, what you've just described." I was like, "Oh, well, at least it was a baby." No, they carry just as much poison. They're just as dangerous. And then my eye went white because I didn't realise I was just giggling at this baby brown going on my foot. But no, there was that, and we saw another large brown, but we were just on the side of the road and it just went and disappeared. But yeah, they're fine. They like their own space as long as they see you coming. Apparently, anyway, that's what we're told. Maybe they're just trying to make me feel better about almost stepping on one. Apart from that, not really. Twitty ran away from a dead huntsman spider because we were getting into a car. And he saw this dead huntsman spider. He just ran away. Didn't give it a second thought, just out of there. But that was dead. He knew it was dead. But apart from that, no, not really.
And as you were going across all these different places, again, into the outback of Australia, I mean, people have heard of the Gold Coast, people have been to Perth and Sydney, people have watched Home and Away and Neighbours and, the Brisbanes and Melbournes, you've all heard of that. But going across the middle of Australia, in your watching your episodes, places and communities that, you would never normally come across. How was the response to you going across? I mean, you were minor celebrities as you went through. You were on all sorts of different radio stations, news stations. You picked up a big following, though.
Yeah, it was really good, actually. Like, we got in touch with a couple of people along the way, and then that kind of just spread. And it was mainly landing in places, and people would think, where the heck have these guys come from? Come over, ask us where we've come from. We tell them what we're doing. They get, we say we were unsupported traveling across Australia, but we had Australia behind us, really. Everyone was super, super helpful. We had a few issues where, 3 emergency landings, and for 2 of those we got picked up. One of them, we'd met a guy the day before. He found the YouTube channel. He was following us across. He said, "Hey, look, you're in the area. I'd love to come and have a drink with you." Next day, we end up landing out in Quarry. That was one of the scariest.
So when you
moments.
say emergency landing, like define emergency landing.
So Twitty ended up with a hole in his piston, so his engine cut out. It was one of the times that we veered away from the road. Usually we'd stick to the road because of this reason. The Pellini, the engine is really highly tuned. This one especially because they're trying to get the maximum performance. The downside of that is if you don't give it the right conditions or you're not monitoring it properly, then it'll bite back effectively, and that's what it did. So he ended up blowing the piston because it got a little bit too hot. Unfortunately, the monitor that he was using failed as well on this flight. It was kind of just the Swiss cheese thing. Things lined up for it to happen. And we have Bluetooth comms, so we were talking sometimes and just listening to music the other times, and just in our own little world. I turned around at this point and I'd lost him. And I'd seen him 30 seconds ago. So I turned around, I'd lost him, and I couldn't see him anywhere. Now, we're over loads of trees, there's one big quarry, and that's it. So I start flying towards the quarry, thinking, oh God, looking around the trees, seeing I can't see him, and then I just see his wing laid out on the ground with the trike down there, too far away to see if he's moving, anything like that. Yeah. It was one of the scariest moments of the whole trip.
It comes up in one of the episodes, doesn't it? I mean, it really brings the reality home.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that one was scary. It turns out he was fine, but the guy we met the day before, we called him and he was like, yeah, sure, no bother, I'll come pick you up in the ute, which, basically a pickup. For those who don't know, came, picked us up. We had to break out the quarry and then fix the gate back when we were broken out. And then he drove us back to a town called Coolgardie where we were staying. Again, just the niceness of people, the kindness of all these people. They didn't have any rooms left. So they put us up to camp beds in the sort of social area so that we could stay there for free. They were like, nah, don't worry about paying us. Oh, we've got some food here, by the way. Here, have this. And then when we left, they gave us little flakes of gold because they're a gold safari camp. So they go around showing people, how to dig for gold. It's huge in that area in Coolgardie area. So they gave us these little flakes of gold in a little container to take away with us. Like, it's just blown away by how kind everyone was over there.
And did you carry spare parts with you? What do you do when you break down in the middle of Australia?
So Twitty was the spare parts man, I was the cameraman. So I had all the camera gear. Twitty had a spare piston, full gasket set. We both carried spare props and spare sort of nuts, bolts that we might need if they come loose on the trike or bend or break, all of these things. But after the first one went, we ended up ordering 2 more pistons to come and further spares along the way because we knew we'd be having more issues.
And Amazon deliver to the middle of Australia? But how does that work?
No. Twitty got in touch with McFly and they were pretty sound about it and really helpful and sent on to sort of the end of the Nullarbor. So far enough in advance, we knew we wouldn't miss it or be waiting for it, and just had a package waiting for us when we got there, basically.
Were the kind of mechanical problems that you had things you were expecting? Were there a lot of unexpected things that happened?
The hole in the piston, well, it happened 3 times. So Twitty had 3 emergency landings. I had to rebuild my engine once, but that was the head gasket. That was no major deal. The pistons were a bit more. You hole a piston, you get basically the aluminium melt on the piston goes into the bottom of the engine, and then you risk the bearings having issues. So whenever you do that, you've got to flush the bottom of the engine out with fuel so it gets all the flakes, metallic flakes out. So it's not just a case of putting a new piston on and going. You've really got to be quite attentive. It's an engine, after all, and it's keeping you up in the air. So a lot of work every time it popped, for Twitty, anyway.
And did you have specialized gliders? What kind of equipment glider-wise did you use for this?
So we were both on Ozones. Andy was on a Viper 5, which is incredibly efficient. His RPMs were much lower than mine while we were flying, but it meant he couldn't let go of the brakes. The high efficiency, super high efficiency, was causing oscillation if he let go of the brakes. So he was basically doing wing overs if he let go. He was, quite heavily loaded on the wing. If he let go of the brakes within about 5 oscillations, he started doing wing overs. And it was funny to watch for me because I was on a Speedster 3, which is solid as a rock. I was just sat there, hands under my armpits, keeping them warm, while he's in the standard flying position for 100 hours, I think it took us in the end. And
what do you do for all that time? So you take off, you wave goodbye to the friendly locals, off you go to the next destination, and then you're in the air. I mean, and some of the pictures you've got an article just coming out in Cross Country magazine.
Yeah.
In the next month or so.
Yeah, really happy.
I saw over your shoulder today while you were proofreading it some of just the amazing images that you've got. So the views must have been spectacular.
Oh, incredible! Absolutely incredible. And because we were trying to beat the weather, trying to get there as fast as possible, we had to take off at sunrise and fly till sunset, which meant we got the best time of the day whenever we were flying. And towards Majura Pass is an image that will stay in my head forever. And it's the roll cloud that we had, the rolling cloud that came across like a wave kicking out to the ocean. It was incredible. And I've got photos of it. I've got a time lapse of it. I've got a bit of video of it, but none of it does it justice for what it actually was. And it was a day where I'd woke up, I was groggy, we were flying along. I was like, I can't be fussed with all of this gear at the minute. We've got a bit of a way to go. I just want to get there, we'll land. I'm not going to film it. And then I saw this rolling cloud coming through and I was all over it. There's nothing that could stop me filming this thing. It was the best thing I've seen in flying. Absolutely stunning. But all over Australia, you get the wheat belt, canola fields as far as you can see. Down on the coast, these massive cliffs, the Great Australian Bight, where we were basically flying over Wales, like super blue ocean.
You were seeing whales from the air while you were flying.
Yeah, with their calves as well while they were swimming. Just the mountain ranges that we flew over. Glen Innes towards the east coast. It was one of the most beautiful but scary flights that we had because there were no landouts whatsoever. So we got as high as possible, stayed as high as possible until we got over that bit. That was one of the most nerve-wracking ones for sure.
And what do you, I mean, all that aside, so it's beautiful, but you said it took you 100 hours flight time?
Yeah.
What do you do while you're up there? You're flying from sunrise, you're flying through the day, you're flying till sunset. Okay, you're landing, you're refueling, you're taking off again. What do you do? I mean, that's a day after day after day after day. How do you keep, was the enthusiasm always there? Were there days where it's always hard to imagine it becomes boring? I mean, it's something incredibly special you were doing, but how did you keep yourselves entertained?
I honestly thought I was going to be so bored flying across. I'm usually into the acro, I like a bit of adrenaline. I honestly thought I was going to be so bored, days, hours on end just flying. But I was looking forward to it every day. Getting up and making progress and pushing. The days where we got up and we knew the bad weather, that's the the heart-wrenching days where you're like, oh, another day of no flying. But listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, things like that.
While you're flying?
While you're flying, yeah. You got the headset, you got the Bluetooth headset. We could talk to each other with the Bluetooth headset on the Envolo comms. And apart from that, there's actually a lot of work in trying to plan the stops and what height you should be at. And, okay, are we going to get to this distance before it gets dark? What if the wind's pushing this way? And trying to figure out whether it's best to stay at the location we're going to be at. So instead of wasting time on the ground, we want to be fueling up and going straight away because, especially with this trip, the weather was bad to us. So we had to make every use of the flyable day. So while we're flying along, I'm looking at the different altitudes to see what the winds are doing, see what the best height we can get to is, see where the clouds are, all of these things. And then, okay, so if we're flying at this speed, if we're going to get there, is that going to be past sunset? Do we need to land at this one and stay there because we might not make the next one, especially across the Nullarbor if we're stuck out.
And the Nullarbor, you've mentioned that a few times. So just for those, even like myself, who don't know, the Nullarbor it's an area, it's a region?
Yeah, so it's across the south of Australia. It's basically a single road. Nullarbor means no trees in Latin, and it's not really this barren land. You think of desert when you think of sort of certain parts of Australia. It's shrubbery. So it's not even landable. If we have engine outs, there's areas that we struggle to land on. The Royal Flying Doctors, because Australia's so big, they've got planes to reach the flying doctors. So they've put sections of the road as a runway where it's wider, so they land there, and that's the only way they're going to land in these remote places to get out somewhere. So it's just quite a desolate area. There's not a lot around. You get roadhouses where there's accommodation and food, and basically where Twitty and I have had so many chips, pies, bacon butters, everything that kept us going over the 3 months, which is why I ended up putting 10 kilos on.
10 kilos?
10 kilos. Yeah, you see the videos, you'll see me fresh-faced on the first one, and by the end, wow. I'll leave you to have a look at it.
Physically and mentally, it must have taken its toll. It wasn't all plain sailing and an easy time. I know for a fact, before the trip, you guys were doing a lot of planning, as you said. Did it did it go completely off the chart for what you imagined it would be? Did you kind of find at the end that, okay, well, we made enough contingency plans to deal with stuff? I mean, how was the end result compared to what you thought it might be?
I honestly thought it was going to be easy. I really did. I was so naive about the whole thing. 5 weeks, no problem. 7 weeks max with bad weather. We'll be fine. And the hardest bit was being sat. Again, the Nullarbor, you get to a roadhouse and you get 2 bars of 3G signal, and we were stuck in these 4 walls for 10 days. We'd go out for a walk, but the winds are too high for us to take off safely, or it's pouring down with rain. They've got another storm coming through. While we were doing this thing, we saw on the news that it was the worst rain in 100 years. Towns were flooded, like absolutely devastated, and we're trying to fly across the country with, well, flying equipment that doesn't deal well in the rain. So absolutely no way of going in it. And it was the 10 days in one place at a time with limited signal, not a lot to do, and watching sort of those funds reduce and reduce with all the expensive food and everything. That was really, really difficult. In fact, like Baladonia, it was the first stop on the Nullarbor, and we were there for 10 days, and that was the hardest bit. And I think, Twitty has said if it wasn't for me, he would have dropped out at that point. Because
really?
It was tough. Because you're not doing anything. And it's like having a little mini prison sentence because you can't go anywhere. You know, you're not working, you can't get online and do something, you don't have anything with you.
It's a really interesting way to look at it, like a mini prison sentence. You are stuck in the middle of nowhere with, without much contact to the outside world by the sound of it either.
Yeah, I mean, I say it was really hard. I think I just wouldn't deal well if I was ever sentenced to prison, for sure. 10 days I struggled, Best be on my best behaviour.
So, along the way, you were using fuel caches. I believe in one of the episodes you can see that you had a fuel cache removed, stolen, however you want to dress it up. When you got to a certain point, your fuel cache had disappeared. And you think that you have an idea that when you were driving from east to west and you were dropping them off, that you clocked someone who had kind of seen what you guys were doing, possibly. Whatever happened, you got there and it had gone.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So we were just parked up on the road. I think we'd already stashed it by this point, but we're, again, in the middle of nowhere. We're just parked on the road. Somebody's driven past and they probably thought, what on earth are they doing there? So they've doubled back and they've had a look while we've driven off and obviously found the fuel and the oil that we stashed. The fuel, it is what it is, but the oil is harder to get. So when the oil had gone, we had to go around and get lifts to different towns to try and get all this oil, and because you can't just put any old oil in there. It's they have sensitive machines, like we've said with the 3 engine failures. So we ended up getting a tow truck 50k to the local town, and then to get out of there we made some friends while we're there, people interested, talking. We borrowed a workshop actually to repair a fatigued frame, and then while we were there made friends, and they took us that 50k back, dropped us off at like 4 o'clock 5 o'clock in the morning, so that we didn't miss any of our trip.
Because otherwise that would have been 50k you didn't fly.
Exactly.
That would have, yes, yeah.
So every bit that, we've had engine failures, we had a lot of issues where we had to land or double back or do something. We've flown every bit of it because we went back or either took off, flew back to that point and turned around and came back. So yeah, we've flown the whole of Australia, all those 5,100 kilometers.
And did you need any kind of special permissions? Were there airspace issues? Like, how did that work? Two foreigners, as you like, for want of a better word, turn up in Australia to do this incredible journey that's never been done by anyone before. Were there licenses issues you needed to apply for, talk to anyone about?
Yeah, so we just used our licenses that we got in the UK to get endorsements over there, so that we could fly legally there. And because our licenses are endorsed for trikes with the sub 70, then we could go over and do that. The issue with airspace, there's a lot of it over there. Obviously, it's a major way of getting around for a country that's so big. So we had to carry airband radios with us as well. We had to do radio exam and get the endorsement for that. And that's the major stuff. Obviously, insurance, things like that we needed. But that was the biggest one. And honestly, I was so nervous for the first radio call. Flying in, I don't know, about 20 minutes before I needed to make this call. I'm going through this call signs in my head, what I need to say, this, that, the other. And for about 2-3 weeks, I realized that they couldn't even hear me when I was making these call signs. Because for some reason, we tested it on the ground, but the engine interferes with the radio quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I had to move the radio in a certain position, which we found out later, for it to work, and use the speaker on the radio instead of the speaker on the mic. It was a constant process of finding problems, fixing them. And you asked earlier about the sort of the going to plan. When we first started, I thought it was easy. Twitty thought it would be easy, and whatever got thrown at us, we'd just deal with it and go. And about a month and a half in, those sort of when we finished turned to if, and it really started to be like, actually, this is hard and we might not make it. This is failing. We're tired. We're running out of money. You know, we've got family back home. We've got all these things that are kind of stacking up. And it was it was up to that point, because I was meant to be coming out in here in October.
Yes, and I remember us talking, and you said, we're off in July. Our RSIV courses weren't until the end of September, October. And he said, no worries, Lee, I'll be back by then. And I remember then thinking, well, I imagine so. I didn't really know about it. I just know Australia's a very big place. And in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, well, to me, it didn't matter. We'd always have a contingency plan. And then it started to becoming clear quite quick that there's no way you'll be back by then, and that's quite a large portion of your life, especially if you're not planning on giving up all that time, to suddenly have to give up. I mean, was there a point where it might have beaten you?
It was getting to that point, and I think it was the call I made to you. There was a lot of things building up, and it was really hard for us to actually get into the adventure, because we thought it would take 5 weeks, and already we're 6 weeks in and we're nowhere near halfway. So we're thinking, we just need to get this done, and it takes away from the actual enjoyment of it. So it was Baladonia where we were stuck for 10 days. I remember calling you and saying, look, Lee, I'm super sorry, but I'm not going to make this. We're not even halfway through, and I've started it now. I have to complete it. And obviously you were super supportive of that. You've got the contingency, all of these things.
Can you imagine if I said, well, I'm sorry, Richard, that's not acceptable. I need you back in Turkey on the...
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be there.
and Andrew's got a very supportive wife as well.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's a long time away for Andrew Twitty to be away from his wife as well.
100%. And he loves work. I've never met someone love their work more than Andrew Twitty. He's a builder, and he takes a lot of pride in what he does. And he absolutely loves it. And he was so excited to get back to work. In fact, while we were at the roadhouses, he'd go around just fixing things. Like I say, we were bored. There wasn't that much to do. So he'd go in and go, give me a job. Give me something to do. I need to, get on. So he became a plumber for the day. We did some tiling in a different one. I ended up cleaning some rooms just to keep us busy. But yeah, so after that sort of call to you, I was like, right, that's the last of my responsibilities that I need to deal with. The money, it is what it is. I can't change that now, all of these things. And from that point, I actually started to enjoy the adventure a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were days when it was super, super frustrating to not be making progress again and again. But the whole adventure was so fulfilling, and well, it opened my eyes a lot to what is possible with a paramotor. For one, I've done fly camping and these sorts of things, but nothing on that scale. And yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed it.
And when you came to the end, was it a very kind of climactic finish? Were there lots of people there? Was there a lot of cheering and banners and things? What was the actual kind of... Did people know you were coming? Because, like I said before, you became kind of minor celebrities going through the outback. You were on radio stations, TV stations. There were people picking you up live on YouTube that were then following you. You got quite this following of people who were really rooting for you. Once you came to the finish line, how did that feel? What was it like?
That was very anticlimactic. We had one guy there who knew we were going to be there, and that's because he rescued us 2 days before. So we got to the beach. Well, actually, if we go back 50k before we reached Byron Bay, we had the worst engine failure that Twitty had. The emergency landing ended up in a swamp, a few feet from trees. It was terrifying, really. I was making jokes about it, being like, oh, here we go again, we're going down. And then I'm looking around going, oh, we're going down and there's nowhere to land. So I made a really tight landing in the only open bit that we could find closer to him. And I had to bushwhack through this swamp to try and get to him. It was a 4-hour ordeal, 50 kilometers from Byron Bay. We've flown 5,050 kilometers. And in that last 50 kilometers, we had a 4-hour ordeal trying to get.
And that comes up in the episodes again, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's in the last episode, and that was honestly one of the hardest bits. That's the hardest bit of work I've done in a very long time, trying to get all of that gear out of a swamp and bushwhacking. And the worst part about it all, which we didn't realize at the time, so I had my little stick. I joke about it being my snake beater, but I was like, there won't be snakes in here. It'll be fine. It's called Death Adder Trail, it's not like a standard adder, it's a death adder, so they're poisonous and they can't kill. And the whole swamp basically has them in there.
Oh, God.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely
50k from the finishing line, 5,000 odd K in, 50k.
Yeah, I was super annoyed at him for that one, actually.
On that note, I mean, doing all of that together, being stuck in places for 10 days, going through the emotions, it taking longer, the emotional roller coaster of it all. Your relationship before it, during it, afterwards stayed the same, became tighter. I mean, there must have been times. It didn't really come across too much in the episodes, as you two were pretty tight together. But was there a time when you two were at each other's throats, or how was it spending that much time with each other?
Twitty is the easiest guy to get along with. I mean, a lot of people will have met him, and they know he will do anything for anyone. He's one of the easiest guys to get along with, so it was no problem. Like, I would spit my dummy, I'd have a full-on tantrum, and he'd just be sat there quietly waiting for me to finish, and then sort of go, all right, let's go. And yeah, okay, cool. So there was like one time when we butted heads, and then we just went, right, okay, let's go for breakfast. And that was it, and that's the only thing. I bought a toy redback spider, and I put it in his bed, and he hates that thing. Like, when we were camping, like I say, he had to put his headphones in so he couldn't hear the creepy crawlies. We set a fire up in the middle of the salt flats at night, and he's like, no, I don't like it, I'm going to bed. Get away from all these creepy crawlies. And so I put this redback spider in, and I'm surprised I didn't get thrown through the wall. He hates it so much, but everything we did was in jest. And I think obviously we got closer. I've spent more time with him than I have my girlfriend over the past year. So yeah, we've definitely got some stories, I guess.
And it's a shame. So he was here when we were in Turkey. We're in London at the moment. We have a slight break between our courses. And ironically, he was here just a few days ago. It's really unfortunate that by the time we were able to get the time to do this, he's literally just left Turkey to go back to the UK. It's a real shame that we couldn't get him on here at all. But it was an incredible feat from the both of you. It's about to come out for the paraglider pilots who are listening to this, all paramotor pilots, in the Cross Country magazine. It's a wonderful 3 or 4 page article coming out in the next month or two. The YouTube series of it is fantastic. It's a really riveting. And my wife, she's involved in the business. She's involved in paragliding. She's not that I wouldn't describe her as obsessed as yourself and I are. But she really enjoyed watching them. We would sit down with a glass of wine at night, and instead of going through Netflix or Amazon, we would actually sit down and watch an episode. And they're 20, 25 minutes long?
Some of them 20, some of them 15. One of them's 8, so that one's a quick sort of recap on the journey so far on episode 8. But yeah, about 25 minutes. If
you enjoyed listening to this podcast about it, I would really recommend anyone go and watch those. So that was all great. You finished that. I mean, I believe you're in process now of trying to ratify that as a Guinness World Record.
Yeah, we're trying. It's a difficult process. We adhered to the rules for it was 91 days in the end. Taking off in the same point. If we can't, then flying back over there. We had to get signatures all along the way. We had diaries, logs, all these sorts of things of everything that was happening. So all of that's been submitted, and it's kind of pushing in the process, trying to get through.
I hope. I mean, that would be what a nice cherry on the cake.
Absolutely,
to actually get a ratified Guinness World Record for it as well. I mean, it'd be fantastic. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is Egypt. Whenever the name Egypt comes up, the two things you think about are snake charmers and the pyramids. And one of the things that you've done that really caught my eye that I absolutely loved was you got a chance to paramotor around the pyramids.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the trips that really stands out in my experience of flying in these different places. Obviously a little bit below Australia because that was a big thing for me. But the Egypt trip, we went over with a company called Sky Sports Egypt, and it was Amelia Plack from Ozone. She invited a few of the Ozone team, and I tagged along for that, and that kind of like spurred the sort of the support that she gave me for Australia as well, which was great, really appreciated. But we end up in Egypt. We travel to the Valley of the Kings. We fly around this new El Galala, that their new city for tourism that they're setting up, and obviously we get to Cairo and we're flying around the pyramids. But not just that, they've organised a special permit for us to be the first people to fly around the pyramids at night, which was it was unbelievable. One of the pyramids was lit up. There's this amazing photo on Ozone's website and on their Instagram, and it's 3 pilots right in front of the pyramid, and it's me, myself, and Johnson from America.
You, yourself, and
me, myself. Amelia. It was me, Amelia, and Johnson from America.
And am I right in thinking you were you went to test the air? They asked you to test the air or to do a test flight to make sure the conditions were good, and which by default makes you the first person in the world to have flown around the pyramids at night.
Technically, yes, I guess so.
And it's an amazing photo. Again, I would suggest have a look for it. I mean, it went all over social media. It was an iconic picture of the pyramids lit up with these kind of fluorescent lights and the paramotor. Did you have lights on the paramotors as well?
So a few of us had lights on the paramotors, but it was mainly about illuminating the wings so that we could mainly see where each other were. Well, I say mainly. It was mainly for the camera, but then benefit is safety. We could see where everyone was. But I ended up attaching it's a videographer's light that I was using to capture some stuff. I ended up attaching it to my helmet, but pointed up at the wing, so that it illuminated the wing from the bottom, and you can see it as you're flying around. But yeah, and I had a light on my foot, which was for landing. I had LEDs around the cage. It was super
phenomenal
fun. So
experience, man, to fly. I mean, the pyramids are one of the most iconic features of the world. Everybody's heard of them. No one knows how they were made, and you got a chance to fly around them in the daytime, which is impressive enough, but at night time.
Yeah, and take off right at the base of the pyramids as well. So I honestly have no idea how they've done it, but Sky Sports Egypt, you're basically escorted onto the site, and you're at the base of the pyramids where no other tourists can go, and they run tandem flights there, and you're allowed to take off and land as you please, and you've got certain limitations with height and where you go and how close you can go to them, but it's not that, it's not that limited for what you're flying around. One of the 7 wonders of the world. It's incredible. It's so incredible to see. It
must have been a pinch yourself moment. I mean, how does it feel to be? There must have been a smile like a Cheshire cat on your face to kind of go, how am I possibly here?
Absolutely, yeah. Flying around. So we had this formation, and we're flying around. We're going up and down the pyramids so that the photographer can get the shot. And I'm on comms. Same comms I was using in Australia. I'm on comms to the photographer who's up out in the distance somewhere trying to get the shot, and he is like a kid in a sweet shop for the first time. He checks his camera, it comes out, he's screaming, he's super excited, and that's just sent beaming smiles through me as well. It was such like a great moment to hear how good the shot is, be involved in it, and then see it in XC Mag and published over, various different platforms as well. Yeah.
Incredible, buddy. The last couple of things I really wanted to talk to you about. I mean, it seems to be the adventure never stops with you. You seem to be building and building and building your profile, building your flying skill. And you talked about your love of acro paragliding. We fly acro paragliding together. We try and do as much as we can in our spare time. It's something we're both really enthusiastic about. You can also do acrobatics on a paramotor. We were watching that video by Shams, that one with Francois Rogalski, a fantastic video, doing all the kind of acro maneuvers. The Malagitas out in the Middle East, in Dubai. I think they're all Qatar or he'll kill me for not know exactly where he is. A very good friend of mine does a lot of paramotor shows. Some friends of mine did a paramotor show. For those who know Oshkosh, it was Malagita. In Oshkosh, it's one of the world's biggest air shows. And they had paramotoring. And one of the things he tells me that the most exciting thing for him was they were holding in a certain area and then they were flying in and there was a B-1 Lancer bomber on its final run past the crowd. And then in they came on their paramotors with the smoke going. Paramotoring is a lot more accessible for things like air shows. And so the acro side of things is really passing over. I know Jack Pimble at the moment is working on a project we can't say too much about, but a lot of that involves acrobatics on the paramotor. However, in paragliding, what was back in the day one of the most amazing tricks, the one that really separated the men from the boys, was the infinite tumble. Now what's come on is the what they call the super stall to infinite. However, on the paramotor, there is something that, and what people always said on a paraglider is all very well flipping over the glider. The glider's going forward, it passes down below you, you flip over the top of it, and that's your tumbling, that's your infinite tumbling. However, I remember talking to some of the top boys in Organia, and they were talking about, do you think there's ever a possibility where we could actually go over the other side of the glider, go backwards over the glider? So the glider would pitch up and you would kind of, and it's very difficult to explain in words, where your body would kind of come up and go, but I mean, how do you describe it? So the rocket loop, what I'm trying to get to, and I'm not explaining it very well because the mechanics of it are very difficult to put into words. You know more about it than me. You're I believe, widely accepted as only the fifth person in the world to do this brand new trick, the rocket loop. Tell me about it.
I believe so. Yeah, fifth. Basically, it's a standard loop to loop that you see the planes do. You use the power to push yourself back over the wing and in the opposite direction of the tumble. And it's incredibly scary.
And how do you come? I mean, who invented this? It's only recently been invented.
Yeah, very recently. So it was a guy called Dimitri, and he's been working on it for a while, from what I hear. And he released it at Cooper Car last year. And then since then, Javi Malagita has done it, Tucker Gott has done it, and then a couple more Americans have done it. So I got in touch with Javi and Tucker, asking them advice, doing this, that, and the other, because it's super new. You don't know what the limitations are. You can imagine what goes wrong, and I actually found a new thing that could go wrong, in that the fuel starvation occurs if you go so slow over the top. So while I was going, when you start this maneuver, you start at 10 o'clock going around, 10:30, 11, and keep building up the speed.
And that means you're not going straight over the wing. The wing's got a slant. It's on the side, yeah. And you practice going over, then you build up the angle a bit more until you get to the vertical point.
So if you don't have the energy, if it starts going wrong, you can pull it off to one side. Whereas if you're over the top, you can't really pull it off because you lose the slack in the line. And I found that I did lose the slack in the line. So I think I was on the worst power to weight ratio that has been done yet. I was on a 18 meter Viper 5. I had a Polini 202 with a 140 centimeter prop. So the Polini that I used for Australia. And when I eventually got over the top, I believe because I was going so slow, there wasn't the force to keep the fuel in the right place. So it dropped in the carb, moved away from the fuel pickup, and caused the engine to splutter right as I was going over the top.
Right when you need that power the most.
Right when I really need that power the most. Yeah, so it was extremely scary. So I will be doing it when I get a smaller wing again, but not until then.
And where did it come from for you? What made you decide to go out and perform the rocket loop?
It was after seeing Tucker do it, to be honest, because I thought it was out of realms of my kit for one, which it was. I did need to borrow some kit to do it. And then I saw the video and I was like, man, I've got this. I can do this. So I started organising kit to borrow, which was the wing. I obviously had the 202 engine, but I needed a smaller wing to do it. So I borrowed the kit. And then I saw in the Facebook groups, people were like, oh, who's going to be the first to do it? Who's going to be the first to do it? And in the UK. And I was like, well, I'm gearing up to do it anyway. So I just need to push a bit harder and make sure it happens. So any flyable window, I was trying to get out and push it. And I actually ended up visiting Alex Colbeck and Twitty down in Harrogate. And the weather was bad all day, so we repacked our reserves just because we needed doing this, that, and the other. And then by the time the weather came around, the sun was going down. We had like a short window, and I was just up, practicing, and eventually just went for it. Like when I felt, 11:30, even just past 11:30, I was like, I'm almost there. I've basically got it. No problems with the engine, no nothing. As soon as I went over the top, boom. It just, what a horrible feeling that was. Throttle pinned, engine just cut. It just cut back to idle, and then I drop over the other side. No problems, and I'm there, and I can't believe it's gone over. And I see the wing against the horizon come over. I'm like, right, I've got it. The engine's cut out. I'm not doing it again just yet, but I will be back on it when I get a smaller wing. And there's limitations to it as well. You can't just do it with a big wing, low power engine. But if you're getting smaller wings, you need to be able to handle them. So it's kind of the same with the acro. You don't go straight for a U-turn Joker, which is sort of top of the range acro performance, really shoots. You start off on an EMB and work your way up. And it's the same thing. You don't just jump straight onto a wing that can do this thing, because you need to be able to manage the rest of the flight as well.
And what's your advice? I mean, it seamlessly brings me on to my next question is, you've come through from a paramotoring background into paragliding. You've become a very good cross-country pilot. You've become a very good acro pilot. You're now doing one of the top tricks in paramotoring. I mean, I've known you for quite a while now, and you put a lot of hard work and dedication in. What would your advice to be to anyone listening to this who's either thinking of making the plunge or is wanting to take their paramotoring, their paragliding, whatever it might be, a little bit further?
I mean, seeking advice from people you trust is one of the biggest things. So I had a mentor when I was working at Rotron. It was Kester Haynes, who's been flying for years, traveled around the world, and I was in that environment. I was with the manufacturer, and I had that mentor who's I could go up and ask questions to, get a solid answer that I knew has come from experience. And there's a lot of people who don't have that, and it's really difficult to find. But that's where things like the SIV come into it. And that's like one of the best things I did was doing that SIV, because I came out here thinking I could do wingovers. I got here and they were awful, absolutely awful. I thought, now I'm a great pilot. I've got loads of hours for the year I've been flying, and I came out here and my wingovers were trash. And so it's getting that experience from people who have the experience themselves, getting the tuition, getting guidance, and then just going for it as well. There's one thing to know what you want to get, and then there's another thing to actually make the steps to go and do it. That goes back to what we were saying about pushing into that paragliding environment and pushing away from that 9 to 5 or whatever it is. It's a really hard step to take, but I know for a lot of people, I mean, the first sentence you say on an SIV is well done for being on this course. And it's so hard to take that step, but when you do, you usually don't look back.
The last bit I wanted to talk about was from having met you on one of my SIV's courses 4 or 5 years ago. One of the things people know we work together. We've got a lot of trips coming up this year. We're off to Macedonia. We've got the Colombia. We've got back here in October. We've got the stuff in Algarnales that's coming up. One of the really exciting things next year is from me meeting you on an SIV course is now we're working together on the SIV courses. You're my launch marshal, and we share a lot of the briefings together. We share a lot of the information that we give to pilots together. And it's come to the point now where, and something I'm super excited to tell people about, is from next May, we'll be running SIV courses together. So you'll now be hosting your own SIV courses alongside me. and that again is just an amazing progression from 4 years ago, from you doing one to you now next year, which will be 6 years? Well, if it's been 4 years, I guess it'll be 5 years. My maths is incredible. You'll be actually teaching your own SOV courses alongside me.
Yeah, it's something I'm super excited about, super enthusiastic, because it comes from the students when they're getting their first manoeuvres. They've been terrified of the spiral dives, and they do one and they go, man, that was fun, let's do another. They do the asymmetrics, they learn how to control their wing. And I've seen the enthusiasm from everybody at the start of the course to the end of the course, and how much they've gained in just 1 week. And to be able to contribute to that a bit more and show people what is capable of the wing, of themselves, is going to be super fun. And I'm really excited for it.
Me too. I can't wait to be able to expand together, to be able to grow the Free Flight Academy together. It's exciting times ahead. And I know, again, we can't talk too much about it, but you've got a few other projects. You've done the flying around the pyramids at night, in the daytime, the rocket loop. You've done the whole of Australia from west to east. I know there's a few more other projects you've got coming up, so things aren't over for you.
No, absolutely. There's a few more in the pipeline. I won't reveal them just yet, but there's a few more projects in the pipeline.
Well, hopefully we can come back and do a podcast,
and
we'll be able to reveal exactly what those. I know some of them, and they're super exciting. I know I can't say anything. They're super exciting. So hopefully we can come back and we can do a podcast Mark 2, and we can reveal a little bit more about that. In the meantime, though, dude, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the podcast today. I hope you guys at home got a lot out of it, as much out of it as I did. I can't, as I said, recommend enough giving Netflix a miss for a night and getting on and watching the 10 episodes of Richard and Twitty's Crossing of Australia. It's incredible viewing. It's a real emotional roller coaster. Thank you ever so much for joining me, buddy. And
hey, thank you very much.
I look forward to podcast number 2.
Absolutely.
And there we have it, a super candid interview with one of the paramotoring world's nicest, most humblest pilots. Richard Dolan, thank you so much. Also, thank you to you guys. We really appreciate the support. If you're enjoying these podcasts, we would really, really appreciate it if you could give a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, give us a rating. It would really, really help us. We've got some really good content coming away. We've got some top names coming to you in the next few episodes, but it would really help us all if you could share the love for these podcasts if you're enjoying them. And until the next one, thank you for tuning in to the Paragliding Debrief, and we will catch you on the next episode.